Amid the chaos of Shedeur Sanders' debut, one issue loomed larger than any stat line: Cleveland's internal dysfunction. Ownership, front office, and coaching are reportedly at odds, each operating in silos, each with their own agenda. That discord trickled down to the field, where Sanders was left with a playbook he hadn't fully repped, teammates who weren't on cadence, and zero margin for error.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Stefanski, despite his accolades, didn't unite the team around their young quarterback. Instead, Sanders became collateral in a power struggle no rookie should be forced in. This wasn't a loss that revealed Shedeur Sanders' weaknesses. It was a debut that exposed Cleveland's. Internal disunity doesn't just make headlines. It kills careers before they start. Until the Browns clean up the politics behind closed doors, every new quarterback will inherit the same broken foundation Sanders was forced to stand on. The NFL world lit up when Cowboys insiders broke the silence on what really happened with Shedeur Sanders' first start, or lack thereof, for the Cleveland Browns. And the fallout wasn't just about one game. It exposed deep cracks in the Browns' foundation. Not just a bad coaching decision. Not just an off week. This was a full-blown organizational failure, rooted in confusion, politics, and a complete lack of preparation. What should have been a milestone moment for a young quarterback turned into a red alert situation for the entire franchise. Let's start with the obvious. Shedeur Sanders did not walk into a functional setup. This wasn't a well-oiled machine, simply waiting for a new driver. It was a clunky, misfiring offense that hadn't even bothered to tune up before putting him behind the wheel. No cadence familiarity. No chemistry with the offensive line. No first-team reps. And still, he was expected to perform at a franchise level. How does that happen? Because the people in charge set him up. Like Kevin Stefanski, for all his praise as a head coach, has a growing list of quarterbacks who haven't developed under him. And that list isn't getting shorter. When it came time for Sanders to step up, Stefanski and his staff weren't just underprepared, they were divided. According to the report, internal tensions between ownership, the GM, and coaching staff led to a delayed, half-baked decision about whether Sanders would even start against the Raiders. In that kind of fractured environment, how can anyone expect consistency on the field? There was no clarity, no commitment, just a cautious rollout designed to protect egos instead of putting the best product on the field. And it showed. When Sanders did finally take the field, it was chaos. Missed protections, misreads that weren't his fault, confusion at the line of scrimmage. And all of it traced back to one thing: the reps just weren't there. For a quarterback to walk into a start without a full week of preparation with the first team, that's a setup for failure, plain and simple. That game against the Raiders should have been Sanders' breakout. Instead, it became a case study in how not to handle a young quarterback. Let's not kid ourselves. Cleveland has a reputation. 13 starting quarterbacks in 5 years. 13. It's not a fluke anymore. This is a team that hasn't just struggled to find the guy. They've actively mishandled the ones they've had. Whether it's constant scheme changes, poor game planning, or just a failure to provide support, the Browns have been the blueprint for what not to do in quarterback development. And Shedeur's case just adds fuel to that fire. He didn't struggle because he lacks talent. He struggled because the team around him couldn't get it together. The coaching staff had an offensive system designed for a completely different style. Quick release, timing routes that don't play to his strengths. No adjustment to account for his deeper read style or his need for more pocket time. No effort to tailor the game plan. And that's the core issue. Young quarterbacks need schemes that match their skill sets, not plug-and-play systems that ask them to fit a mold that doesn't suit them. This isn't new information. Every top quarterback in the league has benefited from this kind of tailored support. When Jalen Hurts broke out, Philly had an offense built around his strengths. When Mac Jones stepped in for New England, he wasn't just handed the starter role. He was handed a support system. That's what real development looks like. And Cleveland? They still think next man up is a game plan. It's not. Shedeur's next 8 games will be the real test. Not because he's under the microscope, but because the Browns are. This is where we find out if they're finally ready to act like a serious football organization. For the first time, reports suggest Sanders will be getting full first-team reps. The offense will actually be adapted to match his strengths. The game plan will reflect who he is, not just who came before him. That should have been the baseline all along. But now, the stakes couldn't be higher. If Sanders thrives under this structure, it completely exposes what happened against the Raiders for what it was, a coaching failure, not a quarterback one. If he performs like the player many believed he could be, then Stefanski and the Browns' leadership will have to answer for why it took this long to give him what he needed. But if Sanders struggles again, that becomes dangerous territory. The kind of territory where narratives are formed. Because fair or not, people will say he's not ready, that the hype didn't translate, that Cleveland needs to go back to the draft board. And that would be a tragedy. Not because criticism isn't warranted, but because it wouldn't be based on the full story. Talent needs structure. Confidence needs consistency. Quarterbacks need real development, not trial by. The blame for that doesn't fall on Sanders. It falls on the people who knew what was needed and chose to ignore it. There's another angle to all of this, the broader league implications. Cleveland isn't alone in this reactive approach. There are still too many teams in the NFL that treat backup quarterbacks as afterthoughts until disaster strikes. No meaningful reps in practice. No live-action game planning. And then they act surprised when things fall apart. It's not enough to have a guy sitting behind your starter. You have to develop him. You have to prepare him like he's going to play, because eventually he will. That's what separates sustainable teams from crisis-prone ones. And the Browns, for all their talent, have been living in that crisis zone for years. If Sanders takes off in these next few weeks, it could do more than just shift the Browns' future. It could send a message across the league about the price of underpreparing young quarterbacks. That talent alone isn't enough. That you can't just throw someone into the fire and hope they emerge unscathed. This isn't about just giving Shedeur a chance. It's about giving him a real chance. The kind every young quarterback deserves. Not a chaotic debut with no support, no structure, and no alignment behind the scenes. The Browns have already done enough damage. Now they have a shot at redemption. But make no mistake, this is the last shot they'll get with Shedeur. If they mess this up, the fallout will last far beyond this season. So now we wait. We watch how he's used. We track how much the coaching staff adjusts. And we measure how much of the talk about support actually turns into action. Because for once, the answer isn't just about the player. It's about the system around him. What do you think? Is Shedeur finally getting what he needs to succeed? Or is this just another chapter in Cleveland's long, messy quarterback saga? Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. Shedeur. Hit like if you're tired of seeing talent wasted. Share this with someone still clinging to hope in Cleveland. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because this story, it's far from let's not sugarcoat it. This situation with Shedeur Sanders and the Browns is bigger than just one ugly debut. It's a referendum on how NFL teams treat young quarterbacks, especially when those teams are already knee-deep in dysfunction. And when someone from a completely different franchise, a Cowboys insider no less, is the one exposing Cleveland's internal chaos, you know this isn't just smoke. It's a 5-alarm fire. The Raiders game was supposed to be Shedeur's first real shot, a proving ground. Instead, it was a trap. The Browns didn't just fail to set him up for success. They handed him the worst possible scenario. A fractured offensive unit, a scheme that didn't suit his game, and a coaching staff that couldn't agree on whether he should even be out there. And if that wasn't enough, they barely gave him any meaningful first-team reps in the lead-up. You don't have to be an NFL expert to understand how crucial that is. Timing, rhythm, communication. Those things don't magically appear on game day. They're built in practice, week after week. But Shedeur? He was sent out with none of it. And when things went wrong, the whispers started. The pressure. The criticism. The classic, maybe he's not ready narrative. But let's flip that. Maybe the Browns weren't ready. Maybe the staff wasn't prepared to adjust. Maybe the real problem isn't Shedeur Sanders. It's the system he's stuck in. Because what we're seeing isn't new. Cleveland has spent years burning through quarterbacks like disposable lighters. Every few seasons, they bring in the next savior, talk about a culture shift, sell fans on a fresh vision, and then stumble over the exact same hurdles. Misalignment between the front office and coaching staff. Poor offensive line protection. Inconsistent game planning. The second something goes wrong, they either panic or pivot. 13 starting quarterbacks in 5 years. That number doesn't lie. And now, here comes Shedeur, caught in the same storm. The difference is, this time, there's no excuse. Everyone saw this coming. The need for reps, the need for a plan tailored to his style, the need for stability. And yet the Browns, once again, failed to do the basics. So when insiders start pointing fingers at Stefanski, it's not just a hot take. It's accountability. Because yes, he's won awards. Yes, he's had some high points. But when it comes to developing quarterbacks, especially young ones, his track record is starting to look a lot more concerning than commendable. Let's not pretend this is all about one coach, though. The dysfunction runs deeper. Sources have hinted at a disconnect between ownership, General Manager Andrew Berry, and the coaching staff. That kind of power struggle trickles down. When leadership isn't aligned on who the starter should be, how do you think that affects player preparation? How do you build a cohesive offensive game plan when no one's even on the same page about which quarterback they're developing? This kind of internal chaos doesn't just create confusion. It actively hurts young players. Confidence is everything for a rookie quarterback. Every snap counts. Every practice rep matters. But instead of giving Shedeur clarity, the Browns gave him a muddled message. One side wanted him starting. Another wanted to protect him. Meanwhile, the actual preparation was half-baked at best. And the worst part? The Browns treated that Raiders game like some kind of test for Sanders. Like they were evaluating him. But how do you fairly evaluate someone who was never given a real shot? You don't give a student a final exam without teaching the material. Yet, that's exactly what Cleveland did. The NFL isn't college. It's not a place where you can just figure it out as you go. Especially not at quarterback. It takes structure, deliberate development, reps with the first team, film sessions tailored to your style, and a system that adapts to what you do well, not the other way around. That's what successful franchises understand. Look around the league. Teams like Philadelphia and Kansas City don't just throw their backups into chaos and hope for the best. They prepare. They develop. They build game plans around their players' actual strengths. The Browns, on the other hand, are reactive. They wait for an injury or a media storm, then scramble to make decisions under pressure. And then they wonder why things fall apart. But here's the thing. Now that Shedeur is finally getting the reps, the system, and the support he should have had from the start, we're about to find out the truth. The next 8 games are going to be the most important stretch of his young career. Not because he needs to be perfect, but because this is finally a fair fight. He'll have the first-team offense. He'll have a game plan that reflects who he is as a quarterback. He'll be able to get into rhythm, build chemistry, lead drives, take hits, learn, grow, develop, the way every rookie deserves to. And if he succeeds, that exposes everything that came before. It will prove beyond doubt that the Raiders game wasn't a failure of talent. It was a failure of preparation, a coaching misfire, a leadership breakdown. And it will force the Browns organization to reckon with the fact that they nearly sabotaged a quarterback with real franchise potential. If he doesn't, well, then the critics will pile on. And fair or not, the label will start to stick. Maybe he's not ready. Maybe he's not the guy. That's how fast the NFL moves. That's how ruthless the league is when a young QB doesn't instantly meet expectations. But that's exactly why this moment matters so much. Because Shedeur isn't just playing for his role. He's playing against history, against narratives, against an entire system that's failed quarterbacks like him time and time again. And if Cleveland doesn't protect him physically, emotionally, and strategically, then the damage could be permanent. Not just for him, but for the team's future. Because let's be real. You can't build a franchise if you can't build a quarterback. And right now, Cleveland's credibility on that front is hanging by a thread. If Shedeur thrives, the franchise has a shot at redemption, a chance to prove they can get it right. But if the dysfunction creeps back in, if internal politics, outdated schemes, or poor planning derail him again, then it's back to square one. Back to scouting the next rookie. Back to selling fans on a new vision. Back to pretending the last failure was just a fluke. It's exhausting. And fans are over it. So the pressure isn't just on Shedeur to perform. It's on everyone around him to give him the actual tools to succeed. Because if they don't, and they lose another promising quarterback to the cycle, it won't just be a missed opportunity. It'll be a permanent stain on the... And other teams are watching too. Watching how Cleveland handles this. Watching whether the league learns anything from it. Because this situation isn't just about one player or one team. It's about what the NFL prioritizes. Development or damage control. Long-term investment or short-term spin. This is a test of process, of leadership, of accountability. So let's see if Cleveland's learned anything. Let's see if they can finally support a young quarterback before the headlines turn ugly. Let's see if they can break the cycle. And if they can't, then they deserve every ounce of the criticism that's coming their way. If you're still not convinced that this Shedeur Sanders situation is a symptom of something much bigger, take a look at the way the Browns have handled quarterback development for the last decade. Better yet, take a look at the results. They've become a cautionary tale, a running joke. And now they're putting another high-profile young quarterback at risk of becoming just another footnote in their ongoing identity crisis. Let's be clear, Shedeur wasn't just brought in as a backup. He was brought in with real expectations, real buzz. He wasn't some camp arm or low-risk project. He was the guy with the pedigree, the college stats, the name, the attention. And yes, with that comes pressure. But pressure can be a catalyst if it's handled correctly. It can sharpen a quarterback, build him, turn him into the face of the franchise. But pressure without preparation? That's a setup. And that's exactly what the Browns did. The game against the Raiders wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was a glaring example of what happens when internal chaos overrides football logic. Instead of creating a stable environment for their rookie quarterback, the Browns handed him confusion. A split locker room. A divided coaching staff. An unprepared offensive line. And then had the nerve to act surprised when it didn't go well. This isn't about whether Shedeur had a perfect performance. That was never going to happen, not under those conditions. This is about the context of that performance. A context that, quite frankly, should have never existed. Because in any functional organization, the moment the decision is made to start a rookie, everything should shift in service of making that debut count. The reps, the scheming, the protection, the pace of play, the communication with receivers. That's standard operating procedure in any serious NFL. But Cleveland? They threw him out there without first-team rhythm, in a system that doesn't match his natural play style, and with an offensive game plan that felt like it was slapped together an hour before kickoff. If that's not negligence, what is? And you want to know the wildest part? This isn't even the first time this has happened in Cleveland. It's just the latest time. Over and over, they repeat the same pattern. Draft or acquire a promising quarterback, fail to adjust the system, panic at the first sign of struggle, and then hit the reset button before anything can develop. So if Shedeur doesn't turn it around in the next 8 games, it's not going to be because he wasn't good enough. It'll be because he never had a real chance to be. But there's a twist. Now that the pressure's on, now that the criticism is building from the outside and even inside the league, the Browns are apparently scrambling to do what they should have done weeks ago. First-team reps, cadence drills, system tweaks, coaching focus. And guess what? That might actually give us the first real glimpse of what Shedeur Sanders can do in the NFL. Because with preparation comes performance. Not always perfect, not always clean, but measurable. If Sanders starts showing confidence in the pocket, connecting on deeper routes, using his mobility to extend plays, it won't be because he suddenly got better overnight. It'll be because he was finally given the chance to do what he does. And that's the part that should scare Stefanski and the rest of the coaching staff. Because if Shedeur lights it up with proper support, it shines a giant, glaring light on just how badly they botched his debut. It's not just about making the wrong call. It's about not even putting in the effort to prepare for the right one. And if the organization had a cohesive strategy, if there was real alignment between the front office and the coaching staff, this all could have been avoided. But according to multiple reports, that internal split is real. Ownership wants one thing. The GM is pushing for another. Stefanski is stuck in the middle, or maybe just stubbornly digging in on his own plan. Either way, it's chaos behind the curtain. And that chaos is bleeding into the product on the field. That's what separates good teams from the ones constantly in rebuild mode. Cohesive organizations don't just react to pressure. They plan for it. They prepare their players. They develop depth. And most of all, they make sure that when a young quarterback steps onto that field, he's not walking into a war zone. Contrast that with teams like the Eagles or Patriots. Love them or hate them, those organizations know how to prepare a young quarterback. They don't treat their backup like a placeholder. They treat him like a future asset. They give him meaningful reps. They tailor the offense. And when his number is called, he's ready. Now look at Cleveland. Shedeur's thrown into a start with no chemistry, no rhythm, and a scheme designed for someone else. And then he's evaluated like that performance was supposed to tell us something about it too. The only thing it told us is that Cleveland still hasn't figured out how to develop talent without sabotaging it. That's why the next 8 games are critical, not just for Shedeur's reputation, but for the credibility of the entire Browns organization. These games are the evidence, the receipts. If he plays well under actual support, then the entire league will know exactly who dropped the ball. And if he doesn't, it'll be nearly impossible to tell whether it's him or the mess around him. And that's a career-defining problem. Quarterbacks don't get unlimited chances in this league. The clock starts the second they take that first snap. And every minute spent in a dysfunctional system is a minute wasted. A rep they'll never get back. A chance they'll never have again. So the Browns need to treat these upcoming games like what they are, a make-or-break moment for everyone involved. This isn't just about Shedeur proving himself. It's about whether Cleveland can finally stop tripping over its own feet long enough to support the talent it already has. Because if they can't, it won't be long before the next quarterback walks in, and walks right into the same fate. Shedeur, what do you think? Is this the start of something real, or just another chapter in the same old Brown story? Let us know in the comments. Smash that like button if you're rooting for Shedeur to finally get the support he deserves. Share this with someone who still believes Cleveland can get it right. And make sure you subscribe. We'll be tracking every snap, every decision, and every sign of progress or dysfunction as this saga unfolds.